Welcome to the Plant Centered and Thriving Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Ashley, and I'm so thankful you are here today. I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, whether you're driving in the car, listening to this, on your morning walk, whatever you're doing. Thank you for being here. Today, I have with me Coach Claire. She has helped hundreds of runners chase their dreams and conquer big goals. So today we talk all about not just running, but how to, if you're interested in getting into running, how to do that. If you're embarrassed to go out and run, she has some tips there. She has some tips for fueling, and she shares her own unique story and how she went plant-based and how she sort of started to adapt things when she started getting into running. And we also talk about how it's never too late to start running. You don't need to have run cross country in high school to be a runner. And so we talk about how she started her running in her mid 30s. Now she's in her 40s, and we talk all about that. So I'm really excited for you to hear her coaching philosophy and how it combines science based training, plant based nutrition, and mindset techniques. And this helps you and her clients unlock every runner's true potential. She's an ASFA certified running coach. She's a sports nutrition specialist, a 258 marathoner, a mom, and borderline obsessive plant lover. So, as you can imagine, we got along really well talking about all things plant based and physical activity. She is a gem, she is full of information. So, let's jump right into the show and welcome Claire. Welcome to the show, Claire.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Delighted to be here.
I am so excited to have you on. I cannot wait to hear more about your journey and get into some plant-based running tips. But before we
Mhm.
do that, Claire, I would love, because I'm genuinely curious to hear about your story, your journey to plant-based. We love stories on this podcast. So we would
Uh-huh.
just love to get a little background on what inspired you to embark on your plant-based journey.
Yeah. So for years I was kind of what you call a flexitarian. I ate birds and fish basically and dairy and eggs. I just really wasn't into red meat or pork, mostly for health reasons. I just didn't like what I was reading about them, and just they started to just not even be appetizing to me anymore, which is crazy because I worked in a steakhouse in college. I was a waitress, I went all the way from eating everything to kind of starting to get rid of some of that stuff. And honestly, what did it is probably pretty stereotypical. You've heard this story already from many people, I'm sure, is I watched Forks Over Knives and I was just like, okay, that's it, done. And I was one of those people who I'm a very black and white person. I'm in or I'm out. And so it was like click overnight, totally done, plant based from there, never looking back, with the exception I had very little kids at the time. And I would still buy them goldfish. And so sometimes I would sneak a few goldfish, but that was really it. It just was a lifestyle that resonated with me. I feel good on it. I still was carrying a little bit of baby weight at the time. And just by switching over to plant based without really dieting, not even restricting, I mean, eating a lot of food, I like to eat. Just naturally lost a few pounds. And so that was kind of encouraging. And it was just something, kind of after I saw that, I was just like, yep, that's it. That resonates with me. And I haven't looked back.
I like that word resonates. I use the word align a lot, but I like how it resonated with you. And like you said, it made you feel good. And so you felt like, okay, well, this is it. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely first for health reasons, but the more I went along with it, the better I felt, as far as environment. So environment is second. And then of course it's the animals. I am not a super like bleeding heart person at all, but I also just don't understand why we're doing that I just don't understand the point of animal agriculture at this point. Is just like from a business point of view, we are feeding so many calories to animals and getting so few calories out. Like it just does not make sense, why we're doing that. And then, of course, if you look at them as sentient beings, which they are, like that's just is a little squirmy for me as well. So, again, so it's health first, then environment, and then animals.
Isn't it amazing how that works? Like you start on this journey for health reasons, and then you end up learning so much more than probably what you anticipated learning as the more you get
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah, it's just really weird the way we're not even allowed to see some of that stuff. Like it's protected, what goes on in some of these slaughterhouses. I live in North Carolina in the western part, so we don't see it too much, but North Carolina is home to a lot of, pig farms and a lot of chickens. And every once in a while these huge ponds will just leak all over the place, and these usually are in places that are, minorities live there, and so there's so many like social things going on too, like not just the environment, but it can be a real disaster. And it's just like, you don't have to eat this, we don't have to do this anymore. And
Yeah.
it's mind boggling that it's even still going on to some extent.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I definitely agree. And I think they featured the pig farms here in North Carolina. I think in one of the documentaries, it might have been What the Health or it
Yeah,
was
one of
one.
those, uh-huh.
Yeah. But you're right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's like, why are we doing this still? Like it really is not necessary. So I know, Claire, you're an amazing runner. You coach a lot of people when it comes to running. So kind of tell us too how you pivoted into that as well, into running. And because from what I understand, and tell me if my timeline's off, you went plant-based first because that was about a decade
Right.
ago.
Mhm.
And then you started getting into running.
Yeah,
Ugh,
yeah. So I went plant-based first, and then it was time for my high school reunion. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to start running just to get in shape. I had run a couple of times in my life previously, but it never really stuck for very long. And so that's what I was planning on doing, just doing it for this short term, just for this, vanity thing to look good at my high school reunion. And that was about 6 months away. And after that came and went, I kept on running. And I was like, well, I'm going to try a half marathon. I had run one in my 20s when I was trying to get over a breakup. And so I wanted to do another one just to see if I still had it. And I did a few minutes better. And so I was happy. And I kind of got that spark after that. And then I saw one of my high school friends was running the Boston Marathon that year. And I was like, what? If she's doing it, I can do that. And I didn't realize at the time that you actually have to qualify to run the Boston
oh.
Marathon. You can't just go show up. So I had to run a marathon first. And so I really got into learning what I could. How do you run a marathon? What do you need to do? And I ran my first marathon here in Asheville on a very cold, rainy day. And Asheville is in the mountains, so it was hilly, is not an easy course. And I didn't make it my first try, but I made it my second. And from there on, just marathoning just really absolutely changed my life. I just fell hard for it, ended up running 9 marathons, and I went from finishing in 4 hours and 2 minutes all the way down to 2 hours and 58 minutes at age 42, which is pretty amazing. And along the way, I became a coach, and, I became a podcast host. And now I'm doing all of that and more. So it has absolutely just transformed my life. So I just say running and plants absolutely have transformed my life. So here I am.
Okay, Claire, you started running like in your mid 30s
Right.
ish. So
Mhm.
really, so you can start at running at any age then. You don't have to be
Yes.
running cross country in high school to be a marathon runner.
Exactly, exactly. In fact, I work more often with people who are just starting to run in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And the joy of that is you keep getting better and better and better. If you never, like, if you're an all-American high school or college, you're going to peak when you're in your 20s, maybe your 30s for a marathon. That's just the way the body works if you are, exercising to your peak. But 99.99% of us aren't doing that. And so when we learn to run at a later age, it's super fun because we keep improving. And it's like we're fighting the aging process. Sure, we're going to slow down eventually, but that's only if we've never peaked. So, if you start running in your 90s and you've never done anything active in your life, you are going to improve. So that is the fun part of it. You think, oh, running is just one foot in front of the other, but there's so much more to it. And the science of it is super interesting. So yeah, it's great that just about everybody can do it. And everybody can improve in it if they haven't done it before. And if you have, like, let's say you really were an athlete in high school and college, it can be really fun to see what you can do now, and see if you can impress that 20-year-old that you used to be.
Yes. Oh, heck yes. And like you said, it was what, after 9 marathons and you PR'd your time by
Mhm.
almo
Over an
over an
hour.
hour?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. That's
Yes.
incredible.
Absolutely, absolutely. It took a lot of hard work, and
Yes.
and I don't race marathons now. Everybody asks me, "Oh, are you still racing marathons?" And I don't do it anymore. And part of it is I did get burned out. I really did focus on it so hard, like it was my job, and it's like, I don't want to do that. But it's also that I climbed my Mount Everest. That was my thing. I caught my Moby Dick. So now I like to do something different. I'm not such a perfectionist that I need to be like, well, can I shave off one more minute? That's not interesting to me. I like doing new things, and my passion now is helping others, achieve the same kind of success and reach their personal goals. So now it's just not just me trying to do something cool. It's me helping hundreds of people do something cool, which is just so awesome.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's gotta just feel so rewarding.
Oh, it's the best. It is
Yeah.
absolutely the best. And as a podcaster that, it's sometimes it feels like a one-way street. You put all this stuff out there and you don't always know how people receive it. So when I started my podcast, The Planted Runner, I had no idea. Like, it got such a great reception, and people were writing me these reviews telling me how much I've changed their lives. And I'm just like, I've never even met you. This is the
Yes.
best. It's
Yes.
very rewarding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you obviously didn't run a marathon. Your first race was not a marathon, right?
I ran a half first,
Half
and
first.
then yeah, and then a marathon for my
Okay.
second race. So I jumped right in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for someone who maybe a marathon, even a half marathon isn't quite on the radar quite yet, or they're thinking
Mhm.
about getting into running, where do you typically recommend people start? Because I feel like there's some parallels even with plant-based eating. It's like you see these people cooking these amazing, elaborate, delicious plant-based meals. And it's like, oh my gosh, well, how am I going to do that? I'm making a peanut butter and jelly right now. So in regards to
Yeah.
running, how do you help people sort of start on their running
Well,
journey?
first of all, peanut butter and jelly is great for
Oh, so
running, good
good.
for recovery, absolutely perfect. So I say walking is a huge part of running well, even if you are advanced. We don't sing the praises of walking enough. It's absolutely perfect for recovery, and it can help your aerobic development. So running is aerobic and walking is aerobic, but you can only do so much running because it's such high impact. So there will be a point in everyone's, life where running is too much. For some people just starting off, 5 minutes might be too much running. If you're advanced, 20 miles is too much running or something like that. Whatever it is, there's a point where you should stop running because you're doing more harm than good. You haven't built up the tolerance for it. So your tendons, muscles and bones and all of those things, they take a while to adjust to the impact forces that running puts on your body. So even if you come to running from another sport like say cycling. So cyclists have built up these huge lungs, to be able to get up the mountain or whatever, but they haven't built they haven't built up their legs for the impact of running. So they need to take it a step back. So what I tell everyone when they're just starting out is walk run. So you can do that in any kind of combo that suits you, but I like actually structuring the walk run, and you want to walk before you need to. Because if you're run until you're absolutely exhausted and then stop and walk, that will only get you to a point. But if you're able to run and then walk 5 minutes and then run and then walk 5 minutes, you can actually spend more time on that particular outing running because you're not exhausting yourself. So maybe you can only run 10 minutes at a time and then you're exhausted and you have to walk home, and that's fine. But I would say instead of doing that, try running for 5 minutes, walking for 2 minutes, running for 5 minutes. I bet you can do 15 or maybe 20 that way. And so that is a way to actually sneak in more running by walking.
I That's a great idea because I didn't think about how if you go out and you're like, okay, I'm just going to run for 20 minutes, but then you run to exhaustion, you can barely walk home, how that might be more detrimental than helpful on your running journey.
Exactly, exactly. And then I would say don't run every single day, not at first. Most people actually should not run every single day. I mean, if you're doing some kind of streak challenge where you run a mile every day, that's not necessarily something that's going to be super detrimental. But if you're actually training for something, you don't want to run every single day because you want to spread out your recovery days. So you want to keep your hard days hard. So you really are stressing the muscles and bones in a good way. But then you want to have an easy day or a rest day in between so that you can get all the benefits of the hard work that you just did. So your muscles need time to repair. And 24 hours isn't always enough. So, if you're running at 9 o'clock in the morning and you think that you're going to be recovered by 9 o'clock the next morning, that's not always the case. And especially as we get older, that recovery process stretches out longer. So you really want to make sure that you are fresh for running and you can run fast when you're supposed to and run slow when you're supposed to. So that's the other key is when you are running, you want to go slow most of the time. And that's the paradoxical way to get faster.
Oh, okay. What do you say to people who are like, well, I'm embarrassed to run slow, or like I'm not a good runner as so and so, or people are going to see me because a lot of runners, they're typically maybe at a gym running on a treadmill, or they're on the road, or people are driving by. Any advice that you give to people who are maybe are kind of a little timid or embarrassed by it?
Yeah, this is a common thing. So everybody feels that everybody is judging everybody else. And usually most people are so concerned about themselves that they're not judging. And if they are, they're jerks anyway. So, who cares about their opinion? The thing is, everyone starts somewhere. You're not going to go run a marathon if you can't run a mile. So you have to break down those, big goals into small pieces. So, what can you do daily that's going to get you to the big goal? So, if you want to do something like forget about the marathon, let's say you want to run a 5K, you want to do the turkey trot coming up. So, what do you need to do every single day to get you to that goal? So, reverse engineer what you need to do, and you need to break it down into manageable steps. And so, if you're worried about, how you look or, you're embarrassed or something like that, what does make you feel good? Would a cute new outfit make you feel good about how you look? Would you doing your hair, whatever it is, like what does make you happy? And try to incorporate that into what you're doing. So there's lots of little mind checks that we can do. If you are a member of a gym and you like running on the treadmill, maybe, if you're embarrassed, you can find times that, are less crowded. I don't know, you can join a group, which some people find intimidating because, oh my gosh, what if everybody's faster?
Mm.
But a lot of these groups are really, really supportive. And there are people of all shapes and sizes. Like I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and it is a running mecca. And we have groups for everyone. Like there is an awesome beginner running group that meets once a week. And every morning they go out for a run and they learn to run together. And then they all run the turkey trot together. So there are people like you out there. We have this you usually have this sense that we're super super unique, and I tell I tell people you're special just like everybody else. And so what that means is there's people out there just like you who feel the same feelings that you are feeling, and if you reach out and find them, you're going to feel a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're so right. Because there are people out there who are just like you, who are probably even thinking the same things of like, oh, I don't know if I should join a run group or I don't know how to start.
Mhm.
Like there are other people out there thinking the same thing. Claire, that reminded me, I have not thought about this in probably over a decade. I joined a run group just out of undergrad, in between undergrad and grad school, and it was one of the best, most fun things I could have ever done for myself because I was
Mhm.
in a new city. I'd moved to Indianapolis for a year and I really didn't know a whole lot of people. And so it was a great way to connect with people. It's a great way to just, I mean, you're running alongside these people sometimes for hours. And so just to carry on conversations, really get to connect with people. It was such a wonderful experience. So I could not
Yeah.
recommend that.
absolutely transformative, and you don't know that until you actually do it. I think it is 100% part of why I was able to grow so much is because I saw women my own age just crushing it, or even older than me, just crushing it. And I'm like, wait a second. This is a totally doable goal. Like, I
Yeah.
can do this. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of patience, but to see people doing what you want to do for yourself, there's nothing like it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. How did that go plant-based wise? Because you already plant-based for a little while, then you started getting into running. How did things kind of start evolving for you, with how you were fueling yourself?
Well, I tell everybody that everybody's vegan when they're running. Nobody's eating cheeseburgers running a
Yeah.
marathon. Some of the ultra runners do some weird things when they're out there for 100 miles. So not all of them are vegan, but the vast majority of what you need to do to fuel your running is eating carbohydrates, and you do need protein, you do need fats, of course, but the majority of your diet needs to be carbohydrate. And that aligns so well with the plant-based diet because unless you're trying hard not to, a plant-based diet is going to be high in carbohydrates just naturally. That's the majority of plant foods are high in carbohydrate. So it just really aligns well. So what you do really have to think about is number one, are you eating enough food? When your mileage goes up, your intake has to go up. And the trick is, even if you are trying to lose weight, you can train for a marathon and lose weight. That is possible, but that's not preferable. Because if you're trying to do something for performance, you need to focus on fueling that performance. And if you're trying to do something for body composition, that might mean you need to be in a calorie deficit, which is bad for performance. That is bad for growth. So you need to be strategic about those two things. So I always say, you can have both of those goals, just choose one at a time and go through cycles of what you need to do. And first of all, decide if you really, really need to lose the weight. If you're a normal weight and you're doing well, your training is so much more important than 5 pounds. I mean, I learned that the hard way. I did get way too skinny and I was too restrictive. And that's not when I ran my fastest. When I ran my fastest is when I let go of that. And I just said, my body does not want to do this. This is not working. And thankfully, I reversed course before I, hurt myself or lost my period or anything like that. Thankfully, I was smart enough to say this is not working. And I ran faster when I was heavier. So being your skinniest is not your fastest. And you're definitely going to be more injury prone if you go into that sort of like weight loss mentality when you're actually trying to do performance. So with the plant-based diet, our issues usually are for athletes is that we can't eat enough, because if you're trying to fuel a marathon schedule on salads, you're going to run into big trouble. So you have to eat some more simple carbohydrates. Those are going to be more easily digestible. They're going to fuel your running better. So what we might consider kind of junky food is actually really great food for fueling during your run. After the run, go ahead, get some real food, get something that you can chew with your teeth. But during the run, you're going to want some really simple, quick carbohydrates. And, your body processes those differently when you're exercising than versus sitting on the couch. So, don't eat a bunch of gels while you're watching Netflix, but that's perfect for when you're trying to run a marathon.
Yeah, yeah, that does not sound appetizing whatsoever, eating some gels.
They're not appetizing anyway, even if you
Yeah.
are running, some of them are better than others, but
Yes. Yeah, true. So speaking of, what are some of maybe your favorite things or some favorite things that you recommend, especially for plant-based athletes when they're going out on these like longer runs where they're not able to eat a burger on the way?
Well, first of all, make sure that you are fueled before you even start. So, I am very much against fasted running, especially for females. Everything that I've read and everyone I've talked to that actually studies this, says to me that fasted running really puts you in a hole, bad for performance. It's bad for recovery, does all these nasty things. So always, 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 always eat before you go on the run. And, your stomach is going to be sensitive sometimes. So you have to really find something that works for you. So maybe it's just a banana. Maybe it is a graham cracker, maybe it's a little bit of dried fruit, whatever it is, find something that works for you always. But if you're going on a much longer run, so I would say anything longer than 60 minutes, you're going to need more than a banana. So you're going to have to wake up earlier, 1, 2, 3 hours before your run, depending on what works for you, and eat a real meal. So that would be something that's carbohydrate rich, but not necessarily 100% carbohydrates. So you want something like a classic would be toast and peanut butter, oatmeal with some nuts and some blueberries on top. So something that is mainly carbohydrate, but the fat and the protein help that meal last a little longer, because the worst thing would be to have this great breakfast and then start your run and your stomach starts growling. So you want to time it so you're not actually hungry when you start, but you want to make sure that your stomach isn't sloshing around, because that cannot feel so good. And then when you're on the run, you got to experiment with what works for you. So some of the gels, they're great as far as nutrition goes, as far as the rocket fuel that you need to run fast. But some people will have stomach irritation with that because your blood is being diverted to your muscles and away from your stomach. So that slows digestion, slows the emptying of your stomach. So it tends to just sit there, and that doesn't feel so good. So I always tell people to experiment. There's lots and lots of stuff on the market. You don't have to just have Gatorade and goo. There are all sorts of things. And, some of the newer products have all this high tech, fancy science with them, what the professionals are taking that allows them to take in these crazy high amounts of carbohydrates. And honestly, what we're seeing in the science is the more carbohydrate you can handle in your stomach, the better you will perform. And so some of these, Iliad Kipchoge just broke his own world record in the marathon at the Berlin Marathon this weekend. And he's taking in 90 grams or more, or 100 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So
Wow.
that's 400 calories an hour. That is a lot of calories. So most normal people can't tolerate that much, but you want to start a little less than that. It all depends on intensity of your run and how long you're running, all of that stuff. But in general, the more you can tolerate, the better. So you got to train your stomach on your long runs.
Wow. So you're not just training for the runs, but you're training your stomach too to tolerate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is 100% how much you can tolerate.
Yeah.
People talk about hitting the wall in the marathon. They say, "Oh, I was great until mile 16 and then I just felt like I was hitting a brick wall." And most of the time, that is not due to your training. That is due to lack of fueling. Your
Wow.
brain simply says, go get some food, stop the silliness of this marathon. And it slows you down because it doesn't want to run out of fuel.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense. So do we need, you talked about the high tech like
Mhm.
goos or things like that are coming out. Do we need those? Like, do we have to go out and buy those, or are there things that we can just get maybe at the regular grocery store to help fuel our runs?
Yeah, yeah. So you don't need that. And I have come up with a few recipes for some gels, homemade gels made out of real food that I experimented with. So the problem with real food on the run, if you're doing a really slow, like let's say you're doing an ultra or you're just jogging, you're trying to get, some aerobic work, you're not at a high intensity level. The lower your intensity level, the more your stomach can handle all sorts of things. But as soon as you start really pushing yourself, again, that blood is being diverted away from the stomach. And so, what seems to trouble people the most is things with high fructose content. And so that's going to be your natural stuff. Fructose is the sugar in fruit. And so if you're relying on, let's say, dried fruit for your fuel, that's going to come along with fiber, and that's going to be high in fructose. And the other thing about some of these more scientific products is that they're meant to have different kinds of carbohydrates, though not just fructose, not just glucose. They're different kinds, and those are absorbed through different pathways. And so what they're finding out is that if you have a variety of different fuels, they can be absorbed in different ways. And so you can actually intake and process more than if you chose a single source. So some of those, so it really all depends on what your goals are and how intense you are about this whole thing. If you just want to run long and you want to be in the woods for 5 hours, absolutely eat real food, eat some potatoes with salt on it, pack some rice with soy sauce. If you're able to run slow enough that you can actually chew your food, which you can't do when you're running fast, if you're running that slow, go for it. Eat a variety of things. But once the intensity level goes up, you really want jet fuel and not diesel.
I like that. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I have actually never heard of anyone mention rice and soy sauce. What a great recommendation, especially if you're able to, like you said, chew and kind of just take things on the slower end.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of the Japanese runners obviously,
Yeah.
do that and it's perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because you need the salt from the soy sauce to keep
Yes.
going too and keep you hydrated.
Yeah, that's brilliant. When it comes to these runs and different things, do you coach people on how to track, every single gram of carbohydrate that's going into their mouth as they're running? Is there some formula that you use? Do you base it more off intuition? What's your kind of approach to that?
So with tracking, I take a let's look at this approach, not a this is how you should do it approach. So just from my own experience, this is when I became a fan of temporary tracking, is because I was having these smoothies after my runs. And so I would put in some fruit, I would put in some plant milk. Oh, walnuts are good for me. Oh, I'm going to put in another banana. And I just thought that these were the greatest things ever. And then I was like, maybe I should figure out what this actually was. And I was eating these 700 calorie smoothies just for a snack, And I was like, okay, I got to re-look at this. I tell people, talk to people if they're really struggling. I think we need to look at the data. We have a watch that tells us exactly what we run, how fast, what our heartbeat is. We have all this data about our activity, but we have very little data about what we are putting in our mouths. So let's look at that for a week. Whether you use a piece of paper or whether you just take a photograph of what you're eating, we don't need to go down to the gram, but I find that it's a wake up call for some people that are like, "Oh, I eat healthy." And actually they're like, maybe we could tweak this, maybe we can tweak that." I'm not about judgment. If I'm not about restriction. If you like something, find a way to incorporate it into your diet. But if you are truly trying to transform your body, either for physical reasons or for performance reasons, you got to know what you're eating. But I also am careful to caution that tracking is a tool. Just like your watch, tracking is a tool. You can use it and it can tell you good things, or you can use it and you can feel really bad about yourself. So I don't recommend that people do it long term, especially if you have eating disorder issues or history of that. It can really kind of trigger people. But if you can really look at it as a neutral tool, it's a snapshot of what you're eating. I do it for a very temporary amount of time. If the client wants to, and if they don't want to, fine. But if we're really trying to figure out what is the 1% difference, really taking a look at what you're eating does make a difference.
Yeah. Like you said, kind of just giving you some data points to see if there's anything that needs to be changed or tweaked to making sure that you're
Mhm.
getting everything, whether it's enough or too much, adapting that based on what it is that you see in the numbers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I make it 100% clear with the athletes that I work with. I am not a registered dietitian. I have a certificate in sports nutrition, but it's not a full degree. So I tell people right away, if you really want meal plans and macro breakdowns and you want grocery lists and all of that stuff, you need to head to a sports nutritionist that who is a registered dietitian. Those are the only people that should be going absolutely that deep. What I do is look at what you're eating and how it relates to what you're doing before, during, and after your runs and your workouts. But for really detailed analysis, they need to go to people like you.
Nice. That makes sense. Yep, I like that.
Hmm.
Okay. Are there any common struggles that you see, especially when people are starting out, when you're working with them, any common struggles you see with your clients or common questions that people have? Because I'm sure there's people listening who are kind of like they're wanting to maybe cross over into doing some more running, whether it's like you said, a turkey trot coming up, or maybe something more extensive like a half marathon or a marathon one of these days. What are some common problem solving things that you do with your clients, especially in the beginning?
Well, the number one thing that I have to do with my clients is teach them how to run slowly. So, running slowly is the hardest thing that I do, and it's counterintuitive. People think, well, I'm trying to actually run fast. Why are you making me run slow? And it's because running slowly is what builds your aerobic system. So, aerobic means with oxygen, and that is the main energy system that is used in any long distance race, which is anything over a half mile. You're going to be heavily reliant on your aerobic system. So that's what needs to be developed the most. When you start running really fast, that does train your high end speed, but our high end speed is actually quite limited. That's going to, be in our genetics for the most part, in our age. And yes, it can be trained somewhat, but what we really have the capacity to develop is our aerobic system. Humans are the best endurance runners on the planet. Given enough time, we can outrun any species. And so that is because of our unique ability to have this huge aerobic engine and because we sweat, but that's different. And so what you need to do is stay in that slow, easy aerobic zone where you can have a conversation. You should be able to have a conversation just as easily as if you were walking. And if you can't, if you can only get a sentence out at a time, that means you really need to slow down. And the other thing it does besides build up your aerobic engine is that it really promotes recovery. So if you're always running in this middle zone, we call it the gray zone, you're getting really good at sort of being average. You're never going to get faster because it's too hard to be easy and aerobic, but yet it's not hard enough to challenge that high end speed. So you're never going to really build your stamina, which is speed plus endurance, because you're always kind of staying in the gray zone. So you need to recover from your hard runs with easy runs or rest days and keep them really slow. So, yeah, you got to run slow to run fast. So, counterintuitive, but it's true.
I was gonna say, I imagine that's a really challenging thing, especially in the beginning. It's like, well, I just want to run fast. That's what I want to do. So why are you trying to make me run slow?
Yep.
Yeah.
Tough concept, but it's absolutely critical.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything nutrition wise that in addition to kind of what we talked about, that you make sure that, especially new people, when they're going out on their runs, that you just make sure that they're aware of, or just like little tips that you give them there?
Yeah, absolutely. Fueling before, during, and after a run. So we already talked about before and during. You want to practice fueling on anything that is longer than 60 minutes, or if you're doing a hard workout that's about 30 to 45 minutes, you'll probably want to take some calories in. And then after the run, we need to focus on recovery. So, the biggest thing that you've lost when you come back from a run is the glycogen, which is what your muscles use to run. It's also what your brain uses. So, it really likes glycogen. So, and you replace that with carbohydrate, but then you've also caused micro damage to your muscles. So, that's a time where you need to get some protein in to repair those muscles. And then a little bit of fat is good too. It is one of the macronutrients, but for runners, the two things they really need to concentrate on are carbohydrates and protein most. So you really want to make sure that you are eating as soon as feasibly possible after a run. Is there a window that you need to refuel in? Yes and no. Is it super important? The body's smart enough. It will take the fuel when you need it. But if you wait to eat, the longer you wait, the more you are prolonging the recovery process. So your body's in the hole from working out so hard. If you delay refueling, it's still trying to recover, but it doesn't have the fuel to recover. So you're just making that whole process harder and take longer. And there is some science that it shows that not eating soon enough can also contribute to muscle soreness. So you wake up the next day and you have delayed onset muscle soreness, and that makes your next run feel harder. And it could have been solved if you just had that smoothie after your run.
Yep. So making sure not only the beginning portion of your run you're fueled for, but also afterwards and beginning too. But yeah, keeping all
Mm-hmm.
those in mind.
Yeah. And you don't need to fuel your little bitty, easy run. You don't need to be sucking down, Gatorade and gels when you're going out for 30 minutes. Please don't do that. But some people do go the wrong direction. And if you're not training for performance, if you are training, if you are running because you do want to change your body composition, then you need to look at what you're eating a little bit differently. And so, what I tell those people is you still need to eat after your run, but hopefully you can time your run so that you are just about to eat a meal anyway. And so, you're not having to have all of these extra snacks. You're timing it so you're just about to eat lunch, or you're just about to eat a bigger breakfast, or you run right before dinner, or whatever it is. So you're not having to take in all these extra calories, if your goals are not performance.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything you recommend in addition to running, like anything restorative or strength training that you recommend in addition to going out for runs?
Strength training, 1,000,000%. We think that all we need to do is run to be good runners. And yes, that is the most important thing. But being strong will make you more powerful, it will make you faster, and it will make you more injury resistant. So, absolutely, I believe that strength training is so, 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 so important. It doesn't actually matter how you get your strength training in as much as long as you do it. So, some people will do 5 or 10 minutes every single day. Some people will do 2 or 3 times a week with a longer session. If you are really training hard for a particular running goal, you don't need to be super strong. You don't need to have, 60 minutes in the gym every day, not at all. That'll actually hinder your running progress, but you do need to do enough to support your running. So, strength training, strength training, strength training. And as far as restorative stuff, I don't do a ton of all of the, things that most people seem to do with the massages and stuff. I definitely foam roll. I have a good foam roller that I love, and that feels amazing. I have a hot tub. I'm lucky enough to have a hot tub, and
Yes.
absolutely has changed my life. If you can get into one of those, the warm water and the water pressure is actually really good for recovery and circulation. But again, the thing that I think is super important and underrated is going out for a walk. So, if you work even if you work from home or at the office, if you can take a 5-minute walk every, hour or couple of hours, or whatever it is, it does an amazing job for your mental health, and just to get the muscles and everything moving. And yeah, I recommend walking so much. So just sneak in a little bit whenever you can.
Yeah. So if you're not moving or walking right now, maybe later today you can do that.
Yes, and it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this big elaborate thing. Just go sneak out for 5 minutes and come back. If you
Yes.
can go for a half an hour walk or walk your dog or something like that, that's awesome. But don't pressure yourself like, "Oh my god, I need to do my walking today." Like, just go get a little sunshine and come back in.
Yes, yes, and don't undermine a 5-minute walk because, like you said, it can be really restorative and just give
Yeah,
yourself some peace for that day.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Wonderful. Well, Claire, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all this wonderful information. Where, if people are interested in working with you or connecting with you, where is the best place that they can do that?
I am the Planted Runner just about everywhere. So Instagram at the Planted Runner. My website is the Planted Runner. My podcast is the Planted Runner podcast. And I also have a book coming out in February, and that is
Awesome.
the Planted Runner. And it's basically how to run your best fueled by plants. So all sorts of running and nutrition advice. So be looking for that real soon.
Yes, congratulations. That's really
Thank
exciting.
you.
Yeah. I imagine a lot of love went into that book.
Too much. One and done for that one.
Yes.
Writing a book is hard.
Yes. So I've heard. Yeah, wonderful. Well, we'll include all of those links in the show notes so that you can easily just click below and check out and connect with Claire. So, again, Claire, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It was fun, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep thriving.